So, the other thing that I wanted to talk about tonight is sort of Mandalorian and Grogu, and sort of just Star Wars in general. And I've got some notes, some tweets, and some things that I'm going to try to pick through here as I go. But yeah, get out of all my Stargate notes. You know, I don't think there's any way around it at this point with the drop off that the Mandalorian and Grogu experienced after the first episode, or I'm sorry, after the first weekend. That's 70-ish% drop in 1 week, and then falling to third place at the box office for the week, at least in the U.S. That is, here's the thing. I like the movie, Mandalorian Grogu. I think that if you had told that movie a few years ago, especially if you had done this movie like right after season two, I think that, or even if you had just had a movie like this at some point in the past, I think it would have been relatively well received. It's an action adventure, pulpy action adventure in the Star Wars universe. It's fun. It's Mando. I mean, if you liked Mando season 1 and 2, and I know for some people, if it doesn't have the epic scope of a Star Wars saga episode, it's just not going to do it for some people at the box office, and that's fine. But to pretend that this doesn't work as a Star Wars movie is also disingenuous. This movie works just fine for what it is. And we've said all along that this wasn't the movie that was going to save Star Wars. But I never imagined that 2 weeks after the release, we'd be sitting here talking about the fact that this movie is almost certainly going to lose an awful lot of money. And I don't see any way around it at this point. Let's look and see what the actual box office numbers are. Yeah, worldwide it hasn't. It's about 250 million. The movie, I don't know. We used to calculate these things by 2.5 times production budget, which puts it in the neighborhood of $400 million. I think now they're saying a little more than that, largely based on, I guess, ticket prices, the lack, and then the decrease in number of people going to the theaters. I was a little surprised. I was trying to do some research on marketing costs for these, but marketing as a percentage of budget actually hasn't increased that much. On average, it has increased, but total, as far as like the range of budget, it actually hasn't gone up that much. Not nearly as much as budget has gone up. But this movie needs to make, 400 million is a real low estimate. I don't think that's going to do it. That's just using the 2.5 times, which used to be an accurate way to do it. Now, if you kind of sit and do the math, what you wind up with is, without knowing the exact numbers, it needs to be somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000, and it's not even halfway there. And so at this point, it really just boils down to how long will they leave it in the theater. If they leave it in the theater another 6 weeks, like maybe it inches up there near the $500,000 mark, but I kind of doubt it. It basically made its production budget back in week one. and then had a serious drop off. So we will see. It doesn't appear to have the legs to make it though, and I see a lot of people out there, kind of, we can't let this movie fail. We need to go see it, and kind of trying to encourage people to go see it multiple times. Now, I'm going to say, I saw it twice because I saw it with my family and I went and saw it with some friends. I enjoyed it. I think it's an entertaining pulp action adventure, which is, that's a very Star Wars thing. But people are not wrong when they say it doesn't have the grand effect on the galaxy. And I'm more fine with, I'm of the mind, I just want good stories. I'm okay with smaller scope stories, like Mandalorian and Grogu, more personal stories. I think that it has a lot of the heart of the original series. It feels a lot like, if you had picked this up in the 90s as an EU book, you wouldn't have flinched. It fits in well. Some people are over the whole Grogu thing, and that's fine too. But I don't feel like the cutesy things weighed this movie down. This movie, if anybody's out there saying the movie's woke, I don't know what they're talking about. People that are screaming that, they're, the whole thing about making Star Wars a girl brand. I don't actually disagree with you when it's in relation to the sequel trilogy, but this isn't that. Solid action, looks good. But for those of you who did like it, you got to stop pretending like the people who don't like it are ruining it, or ruining Star Wars. The bottom line is Disney / Lucasfilm have burned up, and I say Disney's done it to some extent. I mean, I still think we're going to see the MCU stuff just be absolutely massive this fall. But Lucasfilm, more than the others, even, although some of the animation departments seem to be doing a pretty good job of this themselves, is they have burned all of their goodwill. And, I've seen several people say, oh, this was a safe Star Wars movie for the normies. I'm sorry. Here's the thing. One, I don't buy that. There's way too many deep cut references in there to just say, oh, it's for the normies. It was for fans. And I think that we just sort of live in a time when it's just everybody's cynical about everything. And Star Wars fans are cynical because of the sequel trilogy, and then garbage like The Acolyte. And then, I think 2020 and the politics of the last 10 years, maybe even longer, I think those things have just made us incredibly cynical. And I actually think that things like The Mandalorian and Grogu are sort of a great push back against those things, not in that it addresses them, but that it gives us something to go out and enjoy without the pressures of it. It left politics out of it, and it left social agendas out of it, and it just told a Star Wars story. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Jon Favreau is not a great movie maker. It's just smaller scope than I think some people would have liked. And then, of course, you've got the people out there that just really, look, if you're out there screaming Star Wars is dead, that's fine. I get it. I get where you're coming from. I don't agree with you. I think that it just takes one really great big movie. It just takes something to get the fandom excited again. And I don't think that's impossible. But for some of you, that's all you're offering to the conversation. On repeat, on loop, is that Star Wars is dead. like, I'll be honest, if that's all you're offering to the conversation, you're either just offering it for the clicks, for engagement farming, or other than that, I don't know why, you are still around. Like, not that you don't have the right to be, angry about it, but like, if it's dead, let's bury that horse and move on, I guess. But for those of you who are saying, oh, it's a great movie and it doesn't matter if it fails, and it's only failing because of the online discourse and the haters you got to be realistic. Like, I've talked to a lot of people that I would consider to be casual fans. A shocking number of them actually had no idea this movie existed. That's sort of how detached people are from theaters currently. I don't think that's just a Star Wars thing. I know a lot of people that I'm like, hey, you're going to go see the, whatever new movie this when they're like, oh, I didn't know that was coming out. People are really just detached from the theater, which is really sad. And I think it would be tragic to see theaters go away, but it does seem to be more and more where we're headed. The thing is people keep saying, oh, see, you can still make a movie that makes $1 billion. Well, actually it's significantly easier to make $1 billion movie today, just from a number standpoint, than it was 10 years ago, because the cost of the tickets has doubled in a lot of places. I would much rather see these things broken down by ticket sales total rather than money or in addition to the money. Because the truth is that, yeah, it's like, yeah, there's movies that push that $1 billion mark or break it. But the truth is, it's never been easier for a decent movie to pull those numbers. I actually agree with you there, Nick. Backyard Tardis says, if Mandalorian and Grogu was the season finale being shown in theaters, people would praise it. 100%. I think it's cut fairly well. I don't think it's necessarily cut like television, but it does in some ways feel like 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. And if it were presented as the finale of the series and just, oh, it's going to get a theatrical release, yeah, I think people would have been more on board with it. Now, some people, and this is just how fickle fans are these days, a lot of people that liked season 1 and 2 did not like season 3. And then after they didn't like season 3, in order to justify how they felt about season 3, they felt like they needed to back up and say, well, season 1 and 2 weren't that great, whatever. So you see a lot of people backpedaling and deciding things that were great, like Mandalorian season 1 and 2. This is season 3 is like a whole season of a side quest. I constantly look at that and go, if they had just called that something else altogether different, I think it would have gone over better and would have left people not as bad of a taste in people's mouths about The Mandalorian. Even though I will still say that season's not as bad as a lot of people think it is. It's just, but it is different. It's a different story. They did get a $30 million tax refund, so, I think I see a lot of people saying, oh, well, licensing. Well, first of all, licensing, one of the things they talk about things like, okay, so, Mandalorian and Grogu has a marketing deal with Burger King. Now, I'm not saying that no money's changing hands there, but the truth is that the way those things are usually handled is not that firstly, Lucasfilm's not going to Burger King and saying, hey, we're going to pay you and you put this on your stuff. And then Burger King's not going to Lucasfilm and saying, hey, let us pay you to use Mandalorian for marketing. These are mutually beneficial marketing agreements. Burger King gets to slap Star Wars stuff on their products for some period of time, and Lucasfilm gets advertising from that. So often in those deals, I don't know on this one because I don't know the specifics. I'm not privy to that kind of information. There's a good chance that no money exchanged hands on a deal like that. Nick, I actually think you'll really enjoy it. Yeah, when you get to go see it. It's but I think a lot of people are but a lot of the accusations I see, like this one, it's the amount of people who are willing to settle for mediocrity is truly sad. I wouldn't call the movie mediocre just because its scope is not as big as a saga film. The scope of it's every bit as big as Solo was, and I didn't see the complaints then about Solo being too small. But also for the people saying, oh, people are just being haters. People are entitled to decide what to spend their money on. And the fact that this is a Star Wars movie that hasn't cracked $300 million in its first 2.5 weeks in the theater is extremely telling. Like, you have to acknowledge that something here is broken. Like, it's not working anymore. So whatever the reason is that people aren't going to see it, and I don't think it has anything to do with this movie in particular. I'm actually now really concerned for Starfighter, even though I'm super excited about that movie. Everything I've heard has given me nothing but reasons to be excited. And, I think the fact that it is Ryan Gosling will probably sell some tickets, but also the fact that he's been heavily involved in the creative process. And one of the things back when Project Hail Mary was out was hearing Ryan Gosling talking about it's not the fans' responsibility to save cinema. It's us. It's the movie makers, the creators. And that alone just makes me respect him and be a little more excited about something that he's doing, because I do know how he feels about wanting to save theaters. But to see tweets like these to say the discourse about the box office performance of The Mandalorian and Grogu isn't important. What is important are having people having a blast with the new Star Wars movie. Champion what you love. I totally get it. And I agree to an extent. Love what you love. Champion it. Go see it as many times as you want to. Given the chance, I'd probably go see it again. But since I have to drive 180 miles to watch a movie, that may or may not happen. And so, yes, there are a lot of people that are going and watching this movie, and they are having a really good time with it. And I'm super happy about that. But to say the discourse about the box office performance isn't important is wild. If you want this property, if you want this IP to succeed and move forward into the future with new shows and new movies, the box office, it's really, really important. They can't just keep losing hundreds of millions of dollars and just keep making this stuff indefinitely. And I see a lot of people say, oh, they'll make up for it in merchandising. They may. I'm not going to tell you they won't, but I am going to tell you that This isn't 1999. This isn't the Star Wars toy and collectible craze that was happening in 1998, 1999. I was there for that. In fact, I have boxes and boxes of stuff that I bought. Those days are gone, and they're gone for a variety of reasons. It's not all Star Wars' fault. The collectible markets collapsed. The fact that groceries cost so much, sometimes I go in there and I'm like, well, I could buy this $20, Black Series figure, or, I could just spend it on groceries. And with 3 kids in the house, yeah, often it's going to get spent on groceries and not on things like that. So here's the thing. Even if they sell enough merchandise to make up all of the pitfall of the movie, that is not what the studio executives want. The studio wants to make the money on the movie. The merchandise sales are supposed to be lagniappe. They're supposed to be something extra on the top. It's like we make our money back on the movie and then we make bank by doing all these additional things. And if you have to put all of that just into making the money back, here's the thing. Again, simple business thing here. It can't just make its money back. It needs to make money. And a company as big as Disney, they can make some movies that lose money, but they do need movies to make money, generally speaking. And they certainly don't need them to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Lots of other let's see. Nick asked me a question. Backyard TARDIS says, would you compare it to Iron Man 2 as a Jon Favreau movie level? Look, no. And I'm just going to say that it's not Iron Man. No, Iron Man 2. Yeah. Actually, I think it's as good as Iron Man 2. It's not as good as Iron Man 1. Because I think Iron Man 1 is one of those really special movies that every director hopes they make. The original Iron Man. Visually, I think it compares well. The action compares well. But there's all these other things. There's the people out there that are saying, oh, it's Disney's fault that it's failing for releasing it in May. They didn't. It's not even like they released it in early May. And yes, some people are still in school, but the truth of the matter is that May has always been May 1st is the first day of the summer blockbuster movie season. May has always been a prime spot. Like, it might not be the most prime spot anymore, but like, it wasn't like they could, this is the traditional release date. There's nothing wrong with May. May, June are still some of the best months to release a movie in, money wise. But honestly, at this point, I don't even know if it matters like as much. Like, Marvel will drop a movie in February and make $1 billion. So, but also over the next few years, there are some things. December's gotten real crowded, and with Doomsday and Dune Part 3 dropping in the theater in December, like, those are both going to do well. Those are both going to make money. Doomsday is going to absolutely dominate. And I'm sorry, once upon a time, Star Wars sat atop the heap as the thing that nothing wanted to release against in the theater. It's not that thing anymore. And I don't think it's fair to lay that at the feet of things like The Mandalorian and Grogu. There are a lot of people that are very, very fervent about their love of the sequel trilogy, and that's fine. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't like it, and I'm not one of those people that's out here saying, oh, they need to, retcon it all. They need to just pretend like that never happened. Like, I'm not necessarily going to complain if it ever happened, but look, y'all, it's not going to happen. They're not going to make they're not gonna scrap episode 7, 8, and 9. They're just not. So it is what it is. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know what it's going to take to save Star Wars at this point, but the fact of the matter is, I think the failure of the sequel trilogy is that it failed to make new Star Wars fans. And I'm not saying none. Like, law of big numbers. It made fans, some Star Wars fans. It mostly made fans, specifically The Last Jedi, mostly made fans of The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi did not make copious numbers of new Star Wars fans. It's kind of like The Acolyte. We saw this all over again with The Acolyte. The Acolyte created a lot of The Acolyte fans, not a lot of new Star Wars fans. And, for whatever reason, Star Wars is failing to make new fans. And I think that it's largely because, and going back to the Stargate conversation, I think the best way to make new fans is with the old formula. Stargate could go back to the old formula, like this show that just got canceled was probably going to do, and would have made new fans. But the studio can't see it because it's not the fans they want. Star Trek can go back to what Star Trek used to be, and they can make new shows, and they will make new that harken back to the old style, old stories, old methodology, and they will make new fans. Doctor Who could do the same thing. And I think that Star Wars needs a return to its roots. And granted, Mandalorian and Grogu is not on that scope. I get that. But in a lot of ways, it does go back to the roots of what Star Wars is, just like Skeleton Crew did. Skeleton Crew went back to the roots of Star Wars in a way that nothing else has. So if you haven't watched that, I highly encourage you to go watch that one. Star Wars needs to return to its roots. It will make new fans. But what they're making right now is not making new Star Wars fans. I think this one will over time. I think once it's out on streaming, I think it'll get a lot of watches. I think it's gonna find an audience once it's available to stream, and at that point it will help grow the fan base. But like, Star Wars needs something big. A lot of these franchises do. They need something big and spectacular, something that the people who fell in love with these things when they were kids or young adults can come back to and be excited about. Star Wars has had the longevity it has because of being passed down from one generation to another. But like, when you create something like The Last Jedi, for instance, and I'm going to keep picking on The Last Jedi, I guess, but when you create something like that, and I'm going to pick on The Last Jedi here with this for a reason. I, of course, saw that in the theater with my kids. But I know a lot of people my age that didn't like it, and they've never showed those movies, the new movies, to their kids. It needs to be something that spans across generations as far as the number of people that like it. The best way to do that, return to the core of storytelling, Star Wars in particular, and then Marvel, where Marvel has kind of gone astray. I think Marvel's Marvel's been a mixed bag, but like the reason Star Wars was so successful, other than the fact that George Lucas built it on the back of nostalgia for other things like the pulp adventures of the 30s, the on the backs of things like Buck Rogers, like and then the westerns and the samurai films. Star Wars was built with built-in mythology, but other than that, what made Star Wars so successful, what makes comic books so successful, and what makes comic book movies so, is that so many of them are universal storytelling. They are modern myths. They are hearkening back to our old myths, and they are things that resonate with people on a very deep personal level. And Star Wars has sort of lost that, and things like Andor is an incredible TV series. And I'm not going to say that I see some people saying, well, it's not Star Wars, but it also like sort of abandons parts of Star Wars, and it tries to be a little bit more highbrow science fiction. And that's not what Star Wars ever was. And that's not what resonated with people. And that's why, even though Andor is spectacular for what it is, has a limited audience. I think that I've seen a lot of people here lately complaining, about, well, they should have just done the Heir to the Empire trilogy. I agree to an extent, except for the fact that by the time they got around to making those movies, the original cast was way too old to do it. And because of the reception of Solo, which I still think you can largely lay at the feet of The Last Jedi, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But Star Wars is not in the shape it's in because of the fans. It's in the shape it is because of the studio. The studio has to figure it out. Because of what happened with Solo, as I was saying, I don't think they want to recast. I think they're scared to recast at this point because I think that's what they blamed for the failure of Solo was the recasting. It probably played a role. I know some people were very unhappy with the casting choice. I enjoy the movie just fine, but I still think that you mostly have to lay the failure of Solo at the feet of The Last Jedi. And so, like, George is the one that used up the years that Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill could have come back and played that in between phase, that Heir to the Empire range. I would still be okay. Like, give it to me in animated form. Lucasfilm kills it with animation. I'd be okay with that. But I just don't think that I don't think they are brave enough at this point to try recasting the big three. And at this point, like, I don't even know if it makes sense. I really think, and Marisha and I have talked about this at length, I think the only way forward for Star Wars right now is to go thousands of years in the past or go at least hundreds of years into the future where we're just basically starting with a clean slate. Arguably, it's what they should have done from the start. I know that you've got this. They tried to walk this line of, well, we're going to set it in an era where the original, the big three can come back. But we also have to make sure the fans like these new characters, so we're going to do terrible things with the old characters, ultimately kill them off and make them bitter, depressed people, and people that walked out on their family. And it is what it is. But bottom line is, decide what you like. If you like something, don't be afraid to say you liked it. If you don't like it, don't be afraid to say you didn't like it. And everybody needs to try to find some common ground and get along a little better. This finger pointing online is pretty tiring. But that's going to wrap it up for me for tonight. Hopefully this wasn't too rambly, although I'm sure it was pretty rambly. But that's going to do it. Thanks, Nick, for hanging out with me in the chat for a bit. Until next time, may the force be with you. Hey there, sci-fi fans. We hope you enjoyed this clip from a previous live stream of the Science Fictionary podcast. We hope you'll go check out other episodes. We hope you'll hit that like and that subscribe button. And please go check out all of our friends over at the Red 5 Network. And as always, may the force be with you.